So I played Civilization 7, and I have some thoughts on it. I've never really been much of a hardcore gamer or anything like that. I might buy like 2 games a year, and they're usually smaller indie type games. But Civilization is one of the few game franchises that I've enjoyed for most of my life. Civ 5 is by far the most played game on my Steam, and yes, I know for some people these are rookie numbers, but for me, this is actually a lot. The next one down is still 400 hours fewer, and honestly, half of these hours for Hearts of Iron 4 are really just me setting up a scenario and then letting it autoplay in the background out of boredom. So even then, the real playing hours are a lot lower. Weirdly though, my first experience with Civilization was actually Civilization Revolution for the Nintendo DS. I didn't have my first personal laptop until I was in high school, and I didn't even have a PC until like 2019, so this was perfect for me when I was in middle school. I loved being able to play as various leaders to build up an empire, and to this day the different gibberish phrases the leaders would say still live rent-free in my head.
Pifarame! Voltarmus!
When Civ 5 came out and I had a laptop, I finally got it, and while yes, my laptop's fan was hard at work the whole time, I was still able to play it just fine. It blew my mind. Seeing the detailed animations of the leaders was so cool, and especially knowing that this time they weren't speaking Sims-like gibberish, but their actual language, or at least closest language approximate, it really won me over quickly. Despite the gameplay being quite different from Civ Rev and more advanced, I loved everything about it. The Gods and Kings plus Brave New World DLC made it even better, and it was cool seeing leaders I didn't think would ever be in games like this in the first place. Civ 6 I was hyped for, but admittedly disappointed. Interacting with leaders was a step backwards from 5 for me. Like many others, I was not happy with how the leaders looked. While Civ Rev's cartoony style charmed me, Civ Rev is by far the goofiest Civ game, so it matches the energy. Civ 6's graphics were almost an uncanny middle for me. Plus, the backgrounds were a lot blander in comparison. I mean, compare Montezuma in Civ 6 versus Civ 5.
Nikwani tekiuach ketel tenochtitlan, Huetlatuani, Tlinon tigneki, Teyauxiwani anoso timawiki.
Nekwani Moctezuma, Emperorin Caíno Aztecas, Tlaquin Tehuatlen, Titlatacatl.
Yes, the Civ 5 Montezuma is way cooler, I'm sorry, it's not even close. While the idea of city districts was interesting, the way they were implemented in Civ 6 greatly frustrated me when I was used to having most buildings simply exist in the city center. For people who love the type of game where you micromanage a city, it was perfect for them. For me, it took a while to get used to, and it almost felt like a hassle. Ultimately though, I stopped playing Civ 6 because it felt like the entire game was skewed towards playing wide rather than tall. In Civ 5, it felt like both were perfectly possible ways to play and win, and that was a part of the fun. In Civ 6, whoever spanned the most cities early on was the most likely to win. Of my friends who were really into Civ 5, 2/3 of them also stopped playing Civ 6 fairly shortly. So for both single player and multiplayer Civ games, Civ 5 continued to be my go-to game. Since I never got all the DLC from Civ 6, I will confess that there were new features added to Civ 6 that did sound interesting, but I never got to try. And I was impressed with the new civs they added in later game that were never in any of the previous games, like Congo or even Canada. Heck, I'm surprised it took until Civ 6 to get Simon Bolivar. So despite my disappointment with Civ 6 overall, I was still looking forward to see what would happen in Civ 7. Before the game came out, I learned about the introduction of ages and that they were going to detach leaders from civilizations. While previous games had milestones like, you have now entered the industrial era that unlock certain things, this game would have you change your civ entirely. Or rather, it's kind of treated like an evolution, but your leader would stay the same. And not only that, but you can combine any leader with any early civ at the beginning. I wasn't sure how I felt about this concept, but it definitely intrigued me. While I wasn't willing to fork over $150 for the so-called Founders Edition of the game, I did spend half of that to pre-order the base game since it did promise more civs than the Civ 6 base game did at least. I felt optimistic, which seems dangerous considering last time, but I was willing to give this a chance. I do want to stress that this video is going to basically be one step above first impressions. Once I installed it, I have so far played 11 hours, and I definitely feel like it'll grow on me the more I play. But I still definitely have a lot of thoughts. As mentioned, leaders are detached from civs. As a result, both leaders and civs each have their own bonuses, so there's a lot to potentially mix and match. The idea is fun, but it can be really weird to see something like Benjamin Franklin, leader of Aksum. I guess it all depends on whether you referred to the AI first by their leader or their civ, but at least for me, that disconnect took a while to get used to. Speaking of Benjamin Franklin, why is he here? He was never president. In fact, people were either confused or even upset at seeing people like him, Harriet Tubman, Confucius, and so on. However, given that leaders are detached and they all specialize in their own areas, I think it can make sense when you view the leaders as a mixture of political leaders, cultural leaders, philosophical leaders, and scientific leaders. Was Confucius ruler of China? No. Was he the leader of an entire philosophy that influenced millions of people across governance and culture? Absolutely. While this expanded idea of leadership does seem new, remember that Gandhi never held political office in India and has been representing India in every other Civ game to this point, and he's a beloved meme in the community. Even if it was solely political leaders attached to their Civ of origin, the Civs evolving at each age means eventually they would mismatch anyway, so if you are going to have them evolve, then it does make sense to make them more detached anyway. That being said, I understand why people may not like this. When you played Civ in the past, were you more interested in role-playing as your favorite character or empire from history, or were you more interested in micromanaging a government and army? For the people who are in the first group, I definitely understand your disappointment. For the latter group, it's just another notch to customize your Civ. But fear not, there are still ways to match your leader in Civ for at least one era, like Augustus and the Romans, and personally some of the special abilities the leaders have are pretty cool. Ibn Battuta, for example, having been an explorer, has the special ability where in diplomacy he can offer to trade maps with another Civ so you can see where they've explored. I like that a lot. That being said, there are many notably missing Civs so far. I know that more will probably come along with the future DLCs, but no England, no Zulu, no Ottomans, I'm kind of shocked. While the base game of Civ 7 does have more than the base game of 6 overall, remember each Civ only lasts one age, so your choice of starting Civs is only 10. But you also get to play as 3 Civs per game, so whether that evens things out is up to you. How does evolving work though? Basically, you build EXP points until you have enough to evolve, and you earn those by completing milestones across the all-too-familiar set of science, culture, military, and economic paths. You obviously can choose which you prefer to focus on, but once you get enough, you get to evolve. Your evolutionary choices are determined by your leader and initial Civ choices. For example, in my first game, I played as Ibn Battuta and the Khmer, so I could choose between either the Abbasids thanks to Ibn or the Chola thanks to the Khmer for the next age. However, if you end up doing well down one particular path, you could unlock a more random evolution as a bonus. In another game, I played as Frederick the Great as the Mississippian civilization, and because I did well in science, I unlocked the option to become the Ming Dynasty of China. So yes, it can be random, but at least it's not totally random insofar as the paths still have logic to them. My one critique of this, however, was that aging felt too much like a soft reset on the game. What do I mean by that? Well, upon evolving into the next age, several things happen. Your army is reorganized to where some units stay and upgrade to more advanced ones stationed in your cities, while others disappear. So on the one hand, cool, I don't have to spend money to upgrade. On the other hand, that one unit I was using to explore the continent that almost found another Civ on the other side of the planet is now gone or all the way back in the city. Independent powers, which are the city-state replacement, are weirdly gone and new ones spawn in different locations. Trade routes need to be re-established. Your production queues are wiped clean, so even if you had one turn left of a wonder, too bad it's all gone and you wasted your time. It even goes so far as to say you're back at turn 1. Once you evolve, every other AI evolves with you as well. On the one hand, if people dislike one leader snowballing and leaving everyone else behind, this does even the playing field a little bit. On the other hand, having so much hard work go to waste can be annoying and it disrupts the continuity of the game. Crises, a feature I will go over a little bit later, are instantly resolved too, so if you're near the brink of collapse, suddenly everything's okay. Sitcom rules, I guess. You do still have your number of cities and complete buildings, so it's not a complete reset obviously, but it's enough to be very jarring. Ages also felt long. The first age, Antiquity, is basically ancient and classical time periods combined. On quick speed, playing as Frederick the Great, it took me 104 turns to evolve to the next age, and it was only 500 BC in-game. That may not seem like a lot since there's 3 ages, and 300-ish turns is pretty quick by Civ standards, but turns take way longer to do because there is more to do. Those 104 turns took me just under 4 hours. Some people love early game Civ, and I do too, but if you're really looking forward to tanks, you're gonna have to either start the game in a later age or play for half a day straight. I disliked districts from Civ 6. I preferred being able to build most buildings inside the city like in Civ 5. Civ 7 didn't totally remove districts, but has improved on them in my opinion by making them more flexible. You still have urban and rural tiles to deal with, but you are no longer required to have a designated science or commerce district. Whenever your city grows a size, you can choose where to spread the urban sprawl, which is nice. Can I play tall like I could in Civ 5? Not completely, but it's a lot easier to still do well with fewer concentrated cities than spamming cities everywhere. It's a nice middle between 5 and 6, so if you have that city micromanaging itch, you can still scratch it, but if it's not your thing, you probably won't feel overwhelmed by it. Graphically, everything is still gorgeous. When you complete a wonder or discover a natural wonder, you get a fun animation for it like you used to in Civ 4, and that's a cool callback. There were also several wonders new to this game, and it was cool to see more variety aside from the stereotypical 7 wonders of the ancient Mediterranean early in the game. Also, rivers are now navigable. That means if you build a city along a big river, even if it's not on a coastline, you can spawn boats there. I like that a lot. While buildings and units are still in the same queue, you can build up a queue list ahead of time if you have a plan, and then move items up and down the list if your circumstances change. The most interesting feature though is being able to designate your settlements. New settlements start off as towns, which means you can only purchase items in them until you pay the cost to upgrade it to an outright city. Then eventually you will be able to give your extra towns and cities a focus which can give them unique functions. For example, if you make a settlement focus a fort city, it can serve as a place to heal up your soldiers quicker should they stop by. I enjoyed this concept and look forward to experimenting more with it in the future. Warning though, cities, while having defensive points an attacker needs to knock down before taking, do not have an ability to fire back on their own like in previous games, so keep a unit stationed there. Also, the improvements are made without workers or builders, so you don't even have to worry about those at all. While it was surprising to me, I actually got used to that pretty quickly and I honestly don't miss them. Roads basically develop naturally and automatically too. The map is gorgeous. I absolutely love the new replacement for the fog with the sea of tiles. The animation of the map being revealed is great, and I like that the tiles with a symbol on them indicate a resource or landmark being in that spot, so you at least have some idea of what you might find, but it's still a surprise. Hilariously, continents and features are named randomly, so you could spawn on a continent called America but have the Yangtze River, or you can spawn on Laurentia and have the Nile River. Also, like I mentioned, rivers are navigable now, so your units cross a big river by getting into boats, and naval units can move up and down big rivers, which I absolutely love. As you explore the terrain, there are also things like ledges that force you to move around them rather than straight forward, which adds a bit more variety than just moving quicker or slower across something. There are also volcanoes which can grow active or dormant, meaning you have to actually factor in that risk if you move a unit or settle a city near one, because when they erupt, they can damage a tile nearby. I do wish you had the option for a strategic mode view like in Civ 5 and 6, because I have a personal attachment to the top-down board game view to get a better view of things like resources and unit distinctions. But I will say in Civ 7 it is actually a lot easier to see every resource without having to hover over it compared to Civ 5, so while I miss strategic mode, I don't feel like I need it. So city-states and barbarians have been weirdly combined to this new thing called independent powers. On the map they appear like a city-state in that they have a singular settlement and you can conduct diplomacy with them. They all represent a real group from history, so it's a cool way to represent other civilizations or peoples that didn't quite make the cut. They even have figures that represent them, which is pretty cool. Like city-states, they have traits and you can work on becoming their suzerain, which is the equivalent of making them your ally/puppet state. What makes them also like barbarians though is many of them start off as hostile, and their units will roam around like barbarians, attacking your units and moving through your borders. They don't raise anything you've built, at least that's never happened to me yet in a game, but they will attack your units or even sometimes your city if it's undefended. Also similar to barbarians, rather than sieging them like a city, you can enter their city and disperse them as if they're a barbarian encampment. It's weird, but I don't hate it. Also, as mentioned earlier, these will respawn upon the next era as different people and in different locations. So while it can be advantageous to befriend one for both as a military ally and trade partner, don't rely too much on them. So you can trade with other civs and independent powers by building your civ's equivalent merchant unit and sending them to the location. Once you're there, you can establish a trade route. Aside from money, you can also get resources this way. I like the way resources are handled in this game, as you acquire them automatically through trade or city expansion, and you can assign them to an individual city in case you need to improve happiness in one part of the empire. That's right, happiness is back. While there are elements from the amenities feature of Civ 6, like the individual city contentment, it still largely works the way it did in Civ 5, where if you get too much unhappiness, bad things can happen. But my favorite part of this is the return of one of my favorite things from Civ Rev and Civ 4, converting cities. In Civ Rev, you could use your culture to pressure other cities into joining your civilization if their culture was low enough. In this, a similar feature is here through happiness. If a city is so unhappy for a certain period of time, they can revolt and choose to join another civ they feel will make them happier. However, it does mean now you have to deal with the problem of solving their unhappiness issue before they change their mind and try someone else. When a city is unhappy, rather than rebel units appearing that you have to fight, there will just be vandalism to your improvements that cost either money or production time to fix. I always loved having other ways to expand aside from military might though, so I'm glad this feature is here. So similar to Civ 6 and also notably similar to Humankind, there are a lot of focus trees for different areas like science and civics, which we're used to, but also leadership traits, which are tilted towards what your leader specializes in. You can also get a lot of token bonuses from finding artifacts on the map, which is the equivalent of ruins. Or every once in a while you get a random narrative event that is a form of mythology and world building, like, oh, you found a new thing, do you want to celebrate it or demonize it? And your choice will choose between a small token bonus in one area versus a small token bonus in another area. Then you have bonuses from choosing a government type, and of course in each age you have a specialization focus also with a bonus. I don't dislike all of these as concepts, and despite how many things to keep track of, it's not overwhelming. However, it does bring up one overall complaint I do have with Civ 7 as a whole so far. How do I know I'm winning or losing? I don't quite mean in the sense of progress towards victory or how much gold another Civ is developing per turn. You can look those up in the game pretty easily. What I mean is, all of these focus trees will give you minor bonuses in gold, science, culture, influence, which I'll get to later, happiness, and so on. But because you can get bonuses on all of these areas across 5 or 6 different ways, I don't have an idea in my head on what areas I'm necessarily doing good or bad in, or what strategy I need to go in to improve myself. Unless my empire is unhappy or I'm losing money, it's never obvious I'm doing a bad job. In Civ 5 or 6, if you fell too far behind, you could feel it. You could actually grow worried about other players getting too far ahead in one area and felt more motivated to change gears if you needed to. Meanwhile, when playing my Frederick the Great game, I would often be surprised to see that I was in last or second to last in everything, despite everything seeming okay overall. Maybe it's just because I wasn't playing on deity or hard mode, maybe it's because I haven't played enough to notice the small signs, but I kind of wished it was more obvious I was aware of my positioning in the game. But even if I did know my position better, I'd also be unsure of where to start. Is it better to devote my civics and bonuses to science things, or should I leave it to buildings and government? No idea. The bonuses and perks from them are so token and basic and spread across everything that it weirdly makes it hard to develop a game plan almost out of choice paralysis, if that makes sense. A new thing you can accrue in Civ 7 is influence points. Influence points are used in diplomacy. Basically, you need to spend them to perform a diplomatic action with another civ. Or if a civ interacts with you and proposes something, you have the option to spend nothing to neutrally agree, a little bit to reject an offer, and a lot to enthusiastically accept an offer and get a bonus. You also need to spend these points to conduct espionage actions against another civ or to befriend an independent power. I actually like this concept a lot because it forces you to be careful with your diplomatic actions. You can't just always befriend everyone forever because you'll run out of points. Depending on how well you conduct diplomacy, civs will feel different levels of friendly versus hostility towards you, and you can see what's causing those feelings by hovering over them. The one minor nitpick I have is you automatically worsen relations if your borders touch, which isn't necessarily new, but AI doesn't go out of their way to avoid this problem. They'll randomly settle somewhere, their borders will touch yours, and then they're angry about it even if you didn't do it to them. Whenever you do conduct diplomacy with them, you don't trade resources so much as offer some sort of exchange where for 20 turns you both get food bonuses or money bonuses depending on if they agree, that sort of thing. A lot of people didn't like how instead of directly facing the leader head on, it's a side-by-side sort of thing. While I do agree Civ 5 style is much better, I don't necessarily hate this, but I totally get why others do. Once again, if you're the type that likes role-playing as your favorite historical figure, it feels less immersive. But graphically, it's different, and I do feel like the leaders look a lot better than in Civ 6, so at least there's that. So apparently disasters were added in a late DLC of Civ 6 that I never got, so Civ 7 was my first experience with them. I absolutely love them. I already mentioned volcanoes, but aside from those, there are random chances for hurricanes, sandstorms, or blizzards to appear and cause damage to nearby settlements. Then there is also the river flood, which can really cause issues for your cities if they're settled directly on them. You can of course spend money or production to fix affected tiles. Then you can also develop the plague, and the plague can spread across trade routes to other civilizations and independent powers too. I love these because it's a chaotic element that can affect anyone no matter how well they're doing, but they're not game ruining. You can also get cool animations with them too if they're directly affecting your Civ. Civ 7 has a large focus on cycles, and one of the events of each age is a crisis. Over the course of the age, you get a random crisis event that forces you to select penalties. It of course gets worse and worse, but then you advance to the next age and it's magically gone. I get they're going for the whole history is cyclical thing, but I'd argue things like crises of political discontent aren't just temporary moments of awful that magically go away, they leave lasting changes good or bad. So I do kind of wish that there was more of a lasting effect going into the next age. Fighting between units is pretty familiar. For taking cities, you do have to take down every walled or fortified district and not just the city center, so there is a bit more complexity with sieges. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. There is also a meter for war weariness, where if you're the aggressor, you have penalties for things like happiness, and if the war doesn't go well for you, it'll only get worse. It does curb aggression quite effectively and force you to be more strategic. The one new feature that was a bit weird getting used to was armies. You have commander units that you can assign other units to. When you assign them to the commander, they can move around as one, which is pretty cool. However, they can't all attack as one, so once you move them to your enemy, you need to remove them from your commander so they can attack. That wasn't obvious to me, so I found it very frustrating wondering why I couldn't attack with my 3 melee units against the enemy. The commander does, though, still offer bonuses to nearby units, and if they do well, you can use War EXP to give the commander more bonuses to give to their men. They have yet another set of focus trees, which is cool, but in both of my games I didn't really fight enough to get an idea on which focus trees are better, but hey, something else to work on, I guess. One gripe I do have though is when you end the war, you can only make demands based on exchanging cities. I do wish I could demand for maybe an extra resource or gold payment, but that's not an option. Hopefully that'll change in the future, but I did find waging war fun overall. So by the time Civ 7 came out, there was already a patch that apparently fixed several problems the pre-release game had, so when I played it, I wasn't plagued with anything horrible. There was one time where when I met a new Civ, there was a brief glitch where the leaders switched to the wrong Civ on the board for a brief minute, but it was fixed after I interacted with the new Civ. Then in my Frederick the Great game, there was one weird glitch where a Roman unit appeared to be on one of my tiles but wasn't actually there. It wouldn't go away unless I placed a unit there. But this didn't happen on my other game, so it could have just been a one-time thing. I honestly found it funny, but 99% of the gameplay was perfectly fine. Some people have issues with the UI insofar that it seemed bland or at times less intuitive. As for the aesthetic, I honestly don't mind a simple gold on dark gray background, but I can get why for some people it might seem like a step down. There were a few things here and there where if I wanted to build more than one thing in my city's queue, it would automatically close the menu after I choose the first thing. Or if I closed the message window, there'd be this awkward reopen button that seemed in the way of everything. Also, for a minor gripe, the heal unit option is tucked away in a side menu, and that felt like a strange spot for it, but maybe that's just me. Overall, the UI could be improved for sure, but I didn't find it detestable or unplayable by any means. I am in this strange place where I was simultaneously hoping for better in many areas, but upon playing it, I was not as irritated by as many things as I expected to be either. A lot of gamer reviews seem to average on disappointment, but admittedly my expectations were kind of tempered by remembering that the starts to both Civ 5 and Civ 6 were both very different than the preceding games, had their glitches and issues, and then became more popular and beloved once a couple of DLCs came out. So while yes, we should want a complete and finished game at launch, I knew I wasn't going to get one, which is why I only got the base game in the first place. But I also know it will likely improve over time. It certainly doesn't hurt to wait on getting it if that's what you want to do. It felt like Civs still in one way, but a completely different history strategy game in another way. In fact, the ultimate change to me at least is that it's less altering the course of an empire's history and more custom build your civilization PC and see how it holds up against the stress tests of war, happiness, and so on. You may really like that approach, you may really hate it. It depends on what you enjoyed about the previous games in the first place. I definitely prefer a balance of both and miss the element of feeling like I was role-playing as not just Augustus, but Rome as a whole. And this difference really affects how you'd feel about some of the other issues. Having fewer civs at the start or notable civs missing in the base game could be enough to outright reject this game if you were the roleplay type. If you're all about custom building your Civ PC, then the leaders having unique traits and bonuses along with the Civs is another new feature that can be a lot of fun to test out. Evolving through the ages can disrupt the continuity and completely change your Civ's vibe when you have to pick a new one, and that can be polarizing if you're the roleplay type. But if you're building your Civ PC, then how fun new features and combos you get to play with. Some of these changes I found irritating at first, but got used to them in my second game and am now ambivalent towards them once I accepted that this was ultimately a similar but different game. Did I still ultimately have fun playing this? Yes. But did I still hope for something closer to Civ 5? Yeah. Maybe I'll be won over by 7 even more as time goes on. I certainly don't regret buying it assuming updates happen quickly, but I don't blame anyone for passing. Feel free to let me know your own thoughts on my opinions, or if you've already played the game, you can tell me your experiences in the comments. I don't do game reviews often, but being the history and maps guy, I definitely felt like I had to throw in my 2 cents. So thanks for watching. I'm Emperor Tigerstar, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, bring back the map replay at the end of the game. Where the hell is the map? I've got to see the map. Of all things to get rid of, why?